Okay, the first thing I wanted to talk about, if you look at the book and you look at some of these materials out there, there's an awful lot of pyrethroids that are out there, and people are using these more and more. They're the cheapest chemistry, although there's a wide range within the pyrethroids. But they'll go from $6 an acre up to about $25 an acre plus. And so it's very easy to say, oh, this reduced risk chemistry for a LEP is $40 an acre, and the volume mix is 45 or whatever it is, so we'll use the pyrethroid, which may be a short-term nice answer when you're just concerned with how much it costs that day, but maybe not when you look at the whole spectrum of things. So if you look at what's out there, there's a lot of pyrethroids. Ambush, Pounce, Permup are all permethrin. Asana, I'm putting the trade name on the left and the common name, chemical name on the right. They're all group 3 materials. Baythroid is beta-cyfluthrin, danitol, fenpropythrin. Desis is not really available anymore. You'll see it with a delta name, the various deltas from Bayer. Delta Gold is one of the more common ones. That's deltamethrin. Mustang Max is now Gladiator, depending on what's available. Gary?
How many of those can you use with Captain?
Pretty much all of them, but it depends on what crop you're using them on. So you don't want to use an EC with another EC on grapes. Well, on apples you can, pretty much. There's been no phytotoxicity reactions on apples with any of these products. But if you go into a grape picture, that's a different story. I'm sorry? That's right, yeah. Proaxis, gamma-cyhalothrin, renounced tombstone, cyfluthrin. Hero, which is labeled for pears but not apples and peaches because it has bifenthrin, and bifenthrin is the product that's labeled for pears and other fruits, but not on apples and peaches. It has zeta-cypermethrin in it, which is what Gladiator and Mustang Max are, which are labeled for apples and peaches. But Hero itself cannot be used on those, just on pears. And then there's Bifenthrin Brigade. I put that up there because hopefully we'll get the Section 18 earlier this year than we did last year. So that's the picture of pyrethroids, and the take home is that there's an awful lot of them, and using one and rotating them with another one is not a true rotation. It's not resistance management. It's basically rotating the same chemistry. So be very careful when you get into the time of year, especially later, mid to late season, when you're looking at stink bug control and say, oh, well, all I have are these pyrethroids, which isn't really true, and you start rotating those. You can build resistance with that, and then if you lose them, you lose a whole cadre of very effective materials for stink bug and some other pests. There are some premixes. Indigo, which is a Syngenta product, is a mixture of thimethoxam, which is Actera, plus lambda-cyhalothrin, which is Warrior. Then there's the premix Leverage, which is a Bayer product. It's a mixture of imidacloprid, which is Admire, plus beta-cyfluthrin, which is Baythroid. And then there's Volume Express, which is Altacor plus Warrior. So you also have to be aware that when you're using maybe 2 or 3 pyrethroids, and you switch to one of these mixes, that's not really good resistance management either, because you're sticking the same pyrethroid chemistry in there. So you have to watch your premixes with these. It's very confusing. And these premixes make it easier to have a very wide spectrum of activity. And when used alone, without plain pyrethroids for a while, some of these pyrethroid mixes can be used in a resistance management program, but if you're using them right after several or right before several pyrethroids alone, maybe not so much. Then there's some materials that are relatively new, not brand new, relatively new. They were out last year, but they weren't really in the book and used too much. Nealta is a miticide. It's a group 25, which is a new group as a miticide, so it can be used in the resistance management alternating materials program. It's not a rescue material. It should be used when mite populations are young, small, immature. So you're not waiting until things build up to a true threshold of 7 or 8 per leaf. It's more of a get 'em early type of material. Savanto is a Bayer product. It's a sucking insect material. It's very active on aphids and leafhoppers, psylla, scales at different rates. For psylla and scale control, you need a little bit higher rate than you do for aphids and leafhoppers, as was true of the neonicotinoids. So Savanto has a mode of action which is slightly related to a neonic, but it is not a neonicotinoid material. And so you can think of Savanto as a neonic that's bee safe. So when you're positioning this material and you're coming in for early aphid controls, either pre-bloom or just post-bloom, and you would normally use a neonic, this would be a good substitute for that, especially if you have ground cover that has flowering weeds, clover, dandelions in it, which we don't like to see anyway. And then there are some new bioinsecticides out there. Venerate and Grandivo are 2 examples from our own. I put the Venerate up here because Venerate you'll also see in the Penn State guide, which is effective for many insects on the label. It's not the most effective material for those insects when used alone. These new bioinsecticides that really have to be used in alternating practices.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think it's the speaker causing interference. Maybe you just moved a little bit.
So it's not the walls
Try just move it, yeah, try that.
moving up and down. How about if I go to the other side?
Stand on your left leg.
Okay. I was never good at that, you know. So some of these bioinsecticides, I still hear a wall vibrating. Maybe some of the bioinsecticides need to be looked at. Oh, okay. Then the last one, Calypso, which is a Bayer product, has been discontinued. You won't see that anymore. And I think what they did is they is that better if I hold it further away? I think they wanted to substitute the Savanto for the Calypso. Calypso is a true neonic, and it's just not being sold anymore. So those are the newish things to put in your hat to think about. So now I know this is not real visible in the back, but I'm just going to go off this this is in your book, for BMSB effective materials as we go into peaches and apples and peaches. There are certain materials that are rated more effective for brown marmorated stink bug than others, and we're going to focus our programs around brown marmorated, although we can't predict the season, how the season is going to be for stink bug. We had a so-so population going into the winter. We had a very easy fall and relatively mild winter. We don't know how that's going to manifest itself in the spring, but you really should think about placing materials that are effective for stink bug when you get to about the early to middle of May. Okay, so let's go to apples and look at what some of the things were that we saw last year, and look at some spray programs that build around stink bug and other pests and what we saw last year. So every year we do a at-harvest sample or post-harvest sampling of fruit and evaluate. We take 100 fruit in a sample, and then we evaluate those 100 fruit for the numbers of injuries for that individual pest in that sample. So Atanaz, I had used the royal we, Atanaz did all this. So he did 418 samples. Okay, that's a lot of fruit if you put 2 zeros in front of it. So that was done and when apples start to harvest and throughout the harvest season. The bottom axis reads apple maggot, internal leps, rosy apple aphid, European apple sawfly, plum curculio, leaf rollers, tufted apple bud moth, San Jose scale, stink bugs, which are primarily, well, any stink bugs, and white apple leafhopper. And then the left axis is the percent damage. The first thing you see is it's very low, and overall quality was good. The second thing you see is the highest bar was PC. So the insect that's coming through your spray programs the most often is plum curculio, mostly early in the season, and going on in through June. So that's something you want to think about in building your spray programs around those early insecticides and how they can affect plum curculio, not only during the petal fall period, but for the next several sprays afterwards. The next highest bar is European apple sawfly, and the next one is stink bugs. Internal LEPs were very low. So you'll see that there's not a lot of insect damage there, but there's a few bars that stand out. And if we looked at another year, that y-axis would be quite a bit higher, different range. And if you look at diseases, not much was happening at all. There were a few farms where we had scab, but this is an average of 418 samples. And we had a little bit of scab, a little bit of white rot, black rot, a little bit of fly speck and sooty blotch, but there isn't much we're going to change as far as your disease control. If you follow what you followed last year and we have an okay year, you'll be okay. It's the insects, and of course that's appropriate because I'm trained as an entomologist and I happen to show more insect damage. It's not by design. So looking at apples, when you start off the season, I'm going to go through some of the examples of sprays and timings, and not all of them, of course, but just examples of some of the primary things you might find. Early on, you're looking at half-inch green to pink. That's up at the upper left-hand corner, and right there. And then the pests, the apple aphid complex, red mites, for oil, European apple sawfly, and scale. So the oil is there for all of those pests, except European apple sawfly. The assail is a neonic. It can be put on at pink, and it's relatively bee safe at pink, and it will take out the adult European apple sawfly. And the Savanto or Nectera are aphid choices. The Savanto, remember, being the relatively bee-safe neonic type of material. The Actera is a neonic, and it is not bee-safe, but it is, as long as it's used without blooming weeds or bloom in the orchard, it's okay. Okay, at petal fall, we have plum curculio, European apple sawfly, oriental fruit moth, red-banded leaf roller, green fruit worm, tarnished plant bug, and a question mark for stink bugs. Probably not at that stage, but in South Jersey, maybe so. Imidan controls all of those. Avant controls pretty much all of those. It's an excellent plum curculio material. Assail doesn't control all of them, but is pretty good for European apple sawfly, does do something for plum curculio, and does do something for the LEPs, maybe not quite as good as the Imidan. If stink bug is present, or if you can start off with Imidan, but they're not really good stink bug materials, but early in the season, I noticed a change. Neonic if aphids are not yet controlled. So if you didn't do anything for aphids yet, and you're at petal fall and you need to have an aphicide, then you probably need to have a neonic or a Savanto on there. First cover, you have plum curculio, coddling moth, question mark for teniform leaf miner, question mark for aphids. Aphids, you don't need anything because you probably already control them. Now is the time you can start to look at these combination materials. Volium flexi, which is Alticore and Actera. Avant, Actera, or Belay. Some of these things have a long PHI. So Belay is one of these things that has a long PHI, and if you're using it for stink bug material, remember that. Actera is also effective for stink bugs. And notice I added the Avant and the Imidan in there because the Avant and Imidan alone are not effective for stink bugs. So you have to use something with it. Second cover, this is when we start to get coddling moth. When you look at our newsletter in the summer, it's about second cover when we're looking at the model says the first spray is due. Tufted up bun moth coincides. Plum curculio may still be going on at that time. That's why we have a question mark. And stink bug always has a question mark because it should be out there by that time, but you have to build a program around it, especially if you see it in the orchard. Indigo. which is lambda cyhalothrin and Actera, leverage, all these combinations that I mentioned. Delegate is not a combination, it's a LEP material, pretty much LEP only, meaning codling moth, tufted apple bud moth. If plum curculio and stink bug are also present and you're going to use delegate, then you need to mix something with it that's also effective for stink bug like Actera or belay. And then belt or turismo, also with Actera or belay. About mid-June, apple maggot can still be a problem in some years, although we didn't find anything in our samples this year. We're at the sort of the southern end of apple maggot territory. And some years we get it, and some years we don't. And it's very rare that we do get it. Probably now, because you're concerned with stink bug, when you're getting into mid-June and you have codling moth sprays on and stink bug sprays on, fortunately, apple maggot is killed very easily. Now you can start to think about pyrethroids. Pretty much any pyrethroid will do, as well as the premixes. If you have scale, this is when your crawlers are out, and you need to think about the Centaur, Steam, or Movento, which is still labeled for tree fruit. This is about the last time you're going to be able to use Movento, because even though it's labeled for later in the season, there are some growers in this room who found out that the hard way that Movento isn't especially effective when the leaves get thick. And we went back to Bayer after we had that, and they said, oh yeah, that's right, we never told you about that. It's not too effective when the leaves are thick. So Movento is an effective material, but needs to be used when the leaves are young and supple. Second generation codling moth, again, delicate or pyrethroid mix, or one of the Volium mixes, type mixes, or belt type mixes. And then you really need to consider border sprays if you have stink bug. And this would start off later. We've done some work in peaches. You've probably heard Ann present that, and I've talked about it too at Hershey. Border sprays are something that have been done on an informal basis in Pennsylvania and here for added stink bug control, and it's certainly done to augment the stink bug control and substitute for a lot of insecticide applications in peaches. Fifth cover, we're looking at the last second generation codling moth spray, maybe oblique banded, although that's rare here. Tufted apple bud moth, we're finding the traps, but in the last 10 or 12 years, we have not seen it at damaging level in orchards. Again, delegate or pyrethroid combinations, and consider border sprays again. And lastly, we can get a third generation of codling moth, or a partial third generation. That's something to watch out for. Codling moth has gone away from the model. It's been stretched out. We think it's been selected for. Certain insects have not emerged out when they're supposed to, and we get this long, drawn-out population for a second generation, and some of those go into a third. All right, looking at peaches. I can't stress this enough. If you have at least 3 to 5 solid acres, and this depends on the shape of your orchard and your surrounding, whether it's a hill or not, and surrounding woods, think about mating disruption, especially for Oriental fruit moth. We've worked with this now for a number of years, most recently to look at how that might work in combination with ground cover management for improving Oriental control, cat-facing insect control, and reducing the sprays that are needed for brown marmorated stink bug. We've been using the ties because they've just been easy to apply, and we don't have to go back and respray as you would the sprayable. The ones we're talking about for peaches, or apples and peaches, because most of you, if you have peaches, you also have apples, and you may have them right beside each other, and in order to make that 3 to 5 acre acreage, you'd be considering both those crops. So if you have both the crops, you're looking at a codling moth OFM twin 2 mix. That's what the CM OFM TT stands for on the gray drawing. And then if you just have peaches, you're looking at the OFM Oriental fruit moth twin 2 material. I know Greg has some displays in the back of the room there. The TT, the twin tube, is basically a tube which splits in the middle that you slip over the end of the branch, and it lasts the entire season. The label, I think, says a minimum of 100 ties per acre, but you don't have to use that number. In South Jersey, we've used 60 or 70 per acre because the populations aren't that high. We've been spraying for years, and we've noticed that the trap catches are down, so that the mating disruption has worked. We take 2,4-D and Stinger and put it on the ground cover in the aisles. That gets rid of the clover, the dandelion, the broadleaf weeds, and that means if you don't have any weeds, you don't have any bugs in your orchard. It also means that you don't have any bees to get killed by the neonics. And you're going to be hearing more of this as time goes by. You've probably heard about it already. EPA wants to, there are groups that want to get rid of the neonics all over, blanket. And that's going to be bad news. And I think if we had practices where we didn't have the bees there in the first place to get contacted, then it wouldn't be a problem. What were some of the principal insect pests that came through in our peach samples? Now, we had 264 samples in peaches, so there's a few less fruit, but still a lot. And along the bottom axis, you see cat-facing and brown marmorated stink bugs. So we're doing external visual samples. We're not cutting the samples. In a research program, we cut the samples open. Here we're not. So the highest number is from mostly brown marmorated. The second highest is plum curculio, just like in apples. And then there's a little blip in oriental fruit moth, and then nothing for any of the others. So the main insect that's coming through your programs in orchards and on peaches is stink bug, followed by plum curculio. The number is low, but that's an average. But again, those are the ones you want to build your spray programs around to do something a little different. Looking at diseases, the main thing that's coming through is brown rot, although that's still a low level. There were some higher places. And secondarily, bacterial spot, and there's a little rusty spot, and just a little bit of peach scab. Nothing out of the ordinary going on. You're doing a pretty good job. But again, the insects were higher, easier for me to say, and easier for me to talk about. Okay, so I harped about mating disruption. What if you did not use mating disruption, and you should? And what if you didn't get rid of all the flowering weeds in your ground cover? Well, that means you're going to have to control some of these other pests. That means you're going to have tarnished plant bug in there, which causes this early damage and later. It means you're going to have possibly more curculio. It doesn't have anything to do with your aphid populations or your scale populations, but oriental fruit moth and tarnished plant bug are the main insect drivers week in and week out in peach orchard. So if you look at the various timing, across the top is days after full bloom, starting at 7 to 15, 15 to 30, going out to about 105 to 120 days. And then we have the insects. So if we go through this, the most likely insects that you're going to see early on, a week to 2 weeks after bloom, are going to be tarnished plant bug, PC, and oriental and green peach aphid, but mostly tarnished plant bug and plum curculio. You're looking at Actera, Volium flexi, Avant, Belay, and Imidan. The green ones are effective for brown marmorated stink bug. The blue ones are not. And then the next 2 weeks, tarnished plant bug, PC, oriental fruit moth are the most likely ones. And the green ones, Actera, Volium, Belay, are the ones that are effective that include brown marmorated. The Avant and Imidan are effective for those materials, but do not include brown marmorated. So the message I'm starting to build here is you have Belay and Actera in there early in the season for brown marmorated if you can get some control for the other pests too. Looking at it 4+ weeks out there, you have tarnished plant bug, native stink bugs, brown marmorated, and lesser peach tree borer. You have a whole host of materials you can start to use there. Imidan is not effective for brown marmorated. The other ones are, and start to see that there are a lot of pyrethroids starting to show up there. And again, at 45 to 60 days out, I'm putting up the green ones that are still effective for brown marmorated. A lot of pyrethroid mixes in there. Imidan, if you don't have brown marmorated, is a factor. Belay is still okay on very late varieties because you have about a 3-week pre-harvest interval with that material. And pretty much similar as you go 75 days out. And you're really starting to use these pyrethroids later on, so it's important to try to mix them with, you see there's lannate in there, which is a carbamate. There's venom and scorpion if we get that with our section 18, which is a neonic. So you need to put some other chemistries in there. And that is about it, because I think I've probably rambled long enough.